This session is being recorded. Thank you all for joining me in tonight's session. Sorry for the delay. Just to give you a quick update, for your other courses as well. We're currently having an issue with instructors coming in as participants. So if you have other classes, there may be a delay in receiving audio, given that we're coming in as participants, but then we have to call IT to have them manually transfer us to the participant role. So moving forward this week, you may have a little delay with your other courses as well. So just prepare for that. So I am Justin Golston, your instructor for the course for Logistics and Supply Chain Management. And thank you all for the short notice on the delay for this Wednesday session. And again, moving forward, we will have this session every Tuesday for the remaining weeks at the same time. Okay. So as for the agenda, I'm going to introduce myself. We're then going to go over the course overview. Okay, is my mic better now? Okay. So we're going to go over the course overview. We're going to quickly go through the CTU policies. If you have experience with that, we're also going to talk about the keys to success for this course, because the keys to success for this course may be different than the keys to success for other courses. In terms of your week one to-do list, we will review that. We will provide an overview of the expectations for this week, and for those that are on this discussion, do you all have well, which of you do not have experience with IntelliPath? Because we have a lot to go through within the lecture itself. So if everyone has experience with IntelliPath, then we can kind of speed through that section to provide more time for our discussion within the lecture. If anyone is not having experience with IntelliPath, please let me know. Otherwise, we're going to kind of go through that very quickly. In terms of my experience, I have spent about 20 years within the supply chain and logistics industry. First working within the manufacturing environment, and once I graduated from undergrad, I went into management consulting, primarily working with manufacturers and distributors. From there, I went into project management as well as consulting in leadership and organizational change. From an academic perspective, I have my undergrad in supply chain, my master's in supply chain, and my doctorate in leadership and organizational change. During that time, I have received a number of certifications within the supply chain and logistics fields. So we will briefly talk about that throughout the course. We'll talk about that shortly today, and tools for preparation for those certifications. But if you are interested in that, and it's also for those that review this recording, if you're interested in industry specific certifications, just reach out to me and I can provide you with some more information. So within the 5 weeks, within the first week, we're going to have a short discussion on the introduction to logistics and supply chain management. Then in next week, we'll talk about supply chain strategy, and we'll talk about how supply chain management is built into the organization's long-term vision for success. The third week, we're going to talk about metrics and key performance indicators. I always have the saying of what that doesn't get measured doesn't get done. So we're going to talk about the importance of metrics. And in previous courses, I have said multiple times that at the end in week 5, you will reflect on which week resonated with you the most, which week was most beneficial to you. And that metrics week is very important. I would say that that's the most cited week that people say, related to them, because everyone's measured. right? You're measured on something within your organization. So we're kind of translating that mindset over to the supply chain management, whereas instead of individual metrics and measurement, we're looking at the operational perspective of the organization to see how that is measured, how we can gauge the pulse of the organization from a supply chain perspective. Okay. So in the fourth week, we're going to talk about domestic versus international considerations from a supply chain perspective. Once again, we are in the midst of one of the that's going to be one of the most cited supply chain disruptions in history. Okay. And we're going to talk about the current pandemic within this course because it is very relatable. And I will say that, if we use the specific examples of what you're experiencing in your professional life as well as in your personal life, you'll be able to relate to the content. You'll be able to remember the content. So we're going to talk a lot about COVID-19. We're going to talk a lot about, how the pandemic has upended, the industry as a whole, not just the supply chain industry, but all industries, around the globe. And we'll talk about the benefits and downfalls to domestic logistics considerations and international advantages and disadvantages. We have seen the disadvantage of international considerations where because of manufacturers who had a heavy reliance on China, they felt that risk for a good few months now, right up until this point. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how the shutdown of China has impacted the supply chain here in the United States and around the world, right? And we'll talk about how a lot of organizations had to move domestically in sourcing and choosing suppliers within the United States, to continue operations. And then finally, in the last week, we're going to take the previous 4 weeks, we're going to put it all together, and we're going to say how will the holistic view of supply chain management, how is that applicable to your role and to your organization? So, in terms of student expectations, I'll say first and foremost, most importantly, the key to success in this course is going to be communication, right? You have communication outlets through CTU Messenger. You have my email address. You have my phone number. So if you have, for whatever reason, an issue, a conflict, a family emergency, just send me a text message, and then we can plan accordingly. Okay, so communication is going to be a primary key to your success within this course. And I would also always say to, refer to your student handbook. We're going to talk about some of the policies in terms of honesty and integrity, as well as the late policy within this course. Also, please ensure that you can open the textbook. Now, I know previously in previous courses, you're able to click that link for the textbook and it'll pop up. But I think that there has been a change within the last month or two where you'll have to sign in to VitalSource to actually review the text within for this course. So I ask that you go into VitalSource to see if you can actually access the textbook before the end of the week. Okay. Also, follow the APA standards within the discussion boards. Please ensure that I had to sign in again. So make sure that you're following your APA guidelines because the APA formatting is a section within the rubric. So you are graded on that. And I say that give credit where credit's due whenever you are researching your assignments. Okay. And I would say that another important thing you do is download the CTU app. I use the CTU app daily. in terms of whenever you all send me CTU announcements or CTU messages within CTU Messenger. I receive notifications through the application. If I have free time and I'm out somewhere, I can just go to the CTU app and look in the discussion boards and respond to you all. See what the activity is on the discussion board. So the CTU app is a very good application to use and download. So I would highly recommend that you download that. So in terms of the attendance policy, now there are only two actions within the course that counts as attendance, and that is posting on the discussion board as well as working on your IntelliPath assignments. Unfortunately, the attendance within these chats do not count toward attendance. Okay. Now you do receive extra credit for attending these chats, but that does not count toward attendance. So that's very important, as I receive a notification that in terms of attendance, as well as your mentor receives a notification in terms of attendance. So please ensure that you are participating within the discussion board each week, as well as your IntelliPath assignments, because those are the only two actions that count as attendance. Any questions on that? Okay. So in terms of resubmission, if you are repeating this class, if you have created content from a previous class that you want to build upon, if you let me know that you are resubmitting an additional assignment, if you are building on a previous assignment, let me know and we have no problem. Right? If you don't let me know about a resubmission from a previous assignment, then I see a high similarity score, then now we have an issue in terms of potential plagiarism, right? So as long as you reach out to me, say that I'm building on this assignment from my last class, build on it, let's go submit it, no problem. Okay, so again, communication is key, and the same thing holds true with this resubmission policy. In terms of the late policy, so as of I think January of this year, the late policy changed in that you only receive a 10% late penalty for late assignments. So for example, if you submit week 2 assignment in week 5, you receive a 10% late penalty, just as you would submit a week 4 assignment in week 5, right? So if you have a family emergency, you're going to receive a 10% late penalty. You're not going to get a 0. So that's very important. So again, even if you have to catch up for whatever reason, you're only going to be assessed a 10% late penalty. So that's very important to know. Academic honesty and integrity, again, that goes back to that resubmission. Ensure that all of your submissions are your own, right? And again, if you are resubmitting a previous assignment, if you're building on another assignment, let me know, and then we can avoid this academic honesty and integrity policy. So I always say that great minds think alike, in that if we have hundreds of students going through this class reviewing the same assignments, you're going to have similar thoughts, you're going to have similar ideas, you'll have similar approaches, right? So I always say, before your assignments, run your assignments through the originality verification to ensure that it is not a high similarity score. Okay, it takes literally 10 seconds to run, and you get a result. If everything's good, submit your assignment. We have no problem. Okay, so that is a suggestion, a recommendation, that you do that. That way we can avoid issues. So again, submit all of your assignments through your originality verification. Academic writing and references. So this is just a step-by-step process in terms of academic writing. In terms of you want to kind of brainstorm your thoughts. You want to deliver those thoughts, and then you want to, deliver that final submission. I mean, that's what this is walking through. If you want to go through this in more detail, just reach out to me, and we can do that. So in terms of the grading, let me stop there. Are there any questions? All right, we got one coming in. Okay, what about verification? What's your question about verification? Originality verification? So if you select this originality verification, as we get in here, it's going to ask you to submit a document, and then you can submit a document within that verification, and it will give you that similarity score or originality score using the exact terms. Okay. So in terms of the grading rubric, so you'll see that the 55% is how you demonstrate, your knowledge. You'll hear me say demonstrate your thought leadership, right? You need to show me that you have mastered that particular weekly concept, right? So that comes from that original submission, right? That is scholarly in tone, that demonstrate that you understand the concepts. It also demonstrates that you used your critical thinking skills in answering that particular question. Okay. 25% is in terms of meeting the requirements of meeting those bullet points, answering all the questions, answering all sections of that particular question. And then in terms of the academic writing, are you using a scholarly tone? Are you including all of your APA references and in-text citations? So that's where that 20% comes in. Okay. So in terms of expectations from me, so I know that I have, the grades are going to be posted by Sundays now, and so for next week, um, given that we're going to be posting up until Sunday of this week for your discussion boards, although I have it listed for Sunday, I typically post on by Friday. Okay, so by each Friday, you're going to get all of your discussion post responses. For your introductory responses, those will be submitted earlier this week, given that aren't required to respond to your peers. And I'll also be responding to you all within for those discussion posts. And also in terms of the IntelliPath questions, as well as general questions in chat or via email, you're going to receive a response from me from within 48 hours, within 2 days, 3 days on the weekend. Okay. Also, again, we're going to hold weekly chats. My office hours are within the course. And again, so for those who are late to this discussion, we are holding this chat on Wednesdays, but all of the chats moving forward will be on Tuesdays at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. So as I said before, keys to success, the primary key to success is communication. You have various communication channels within this class. You have CTU Messenger, you have IntelliPath Messenger, you have my phone number so you can send me a text message, and you have my email address where you can send me an email. So there are no shortages of getting in contact with me in the event that something comes up. So again, use those channels. So if anything comes up, if you feel like you're going to be late with your assignments, please reach out to me. Also, just as you are doing now, the live chats are going to be very beneficial in that we touch on a number of the concepts that you are going to be reviewing during each week. So it's very important, although not required, it's very important to review or attend those chats. Okay. Now you do receive extra credit for attending each chat, and if you are, for whatever reason, are unable to make the live chat, these chats will be recorded and uploaded as soon as we wrap up the meeting. Okay, so if you're unable to meet one of those chats, you can review the chat, review the recording, write a 200-word summary of the recording, submit it, and you receive the same exact extra credit as you would be attending a live session. Now, my preferred method is to attend the live session if you can, because there are engaging conversations in terms of when we get to the lecture. A lot of students will ask, how is this applicable to my role within the organization? So we will, talk about the concepts in more detail and actually apply them into different work environments, into different industries. So it is very, very beneficial to attend those live chats if you're available. So also other resources that we have in terms of keys to be successful in the course. We have the classroom announcements, where along with the weekly announcements that will outline the weekly concepts and objectives, I also include resources within those announcements that will be beneficial within your career. So just don't breeze through those announcements. There are great resources in there that I include that are relevant to the course as where they're relevant to your careers. Also, within the SCM 210 resource page and the supply chain management and logistics page, which we'll get to shortly, we're going to get a overview of that. There's resources in there that are beneficial where so CTU has worked with and collaborated with industry leading associations, right? And organizations pay a lot of money for these resources, but CTU has secured these resources for you, and they're free to you, right? So what I tell people is that just create a Google account, and for those resources that are downloadable, upload those resources within Google Drive, right? Storage is free, and you will be referring back to those resources, later on for years to come. So I always say to browse through that course resource page, and if you see links, download those links. Even if you think you're not going to use them, you might use them 3 years down the road, right? And then it's as simple as going into Google Drive, searching it within Google Drive, and then now you have it. So I always suggest people to do that, because that's been very beneficial to myself as well as hundreds of students. Your writing support center is there for you. If you need assistance in writing as well as in APA formatting, and also we're going to talk about Muse resources more next week, but we will highlight them this week. So in terms of week one, a number of you have performed your introduction. Thank you for that. I will continue to respond to each and every one of you for that discussion. You also are to again, for those who arrived late, for those who are listening in, please go in to look to see if you can open up that ebook within the course, because you may have to sign it in a vital source. Okay, so again, please ensure that you're able to access the textbook. Also, within week one, you are to read chapters 1 and 2 of the ebook, and you are to respond to that initial assignment. So within that assignment, we are going to answer, and we're going to talk about these in more detail shortly during the lecture, of what are the elements that make up the supply chain. Well, who are the players? Who are the players within supply chain management? Okay, we're going to talk about that shortly. What are the flows within supply chain management? How does capital flow within supply chain management? How does knowledge and information flow in supply chain management? How does products flow within supply chain management? We're going to talk about that shortly. And also, and most importantly, how are supply chain coordination and disruption important to supply chain management? And that is something that we are experiencing right now today and have been experiencing since mid-March of this year, more than ever before. Okay, so that original. Once you have reviewed the information, once you have reviewed this lecture, which we're going to get to shortly, you're going to review chapters 1 and 2. And as you compose your assignments, you need to ensure that originality score is below 35%, and then you would actually upload that assignment. Now, once you have uploaded your assignment, you are to review your peers' assignments and respond to 2 of those peers. Okay. And then those responses need to be at least 100 words. Okay. So I'm going to ask the question again because this is going to kind of set the stage of how quickly we go through this. Who does not have experience within the IntelliPath? Okay. So very quickly, IntelliPath is this an adaptive learning application where you are going to have assignments based on your answers within that determined knowledge section. Okay. So I will say that do not try to game the system in terms of IntelliPath because IntelliPath is there to help you. Okay. So to access IntelliPath, you would go into the assignments, select IntelliPath, and once you get into IntelliPath, and we talked about the adaptive learning where that assignment will be created based on your responses, and as the more questions you get correct, the more difficult the questions get. Right, the more questions you get correct within determined knowledge, the more difficult the assessment is going to get. Right, so it is there to help you, and whether you do well or whether you do not do well on the determined knowledge does not have any bearing on your IntelliPath score. Right, your IntelliPath is there to kind of make you somewhat of a, not really an expert, but make you more knowledgeable, I will say, on each weekly concept. Okay, so once you log into IntelliPath, you're going to have a number of indicators where here is going to show you what their progress within that particular week, within that particular module. This second option is going to show you what your mastery level is. So the goal is to be a master in every single one of these weeks. Right, and also it's important to note that you can only improve on your score. So what that means is that once you go through IntelliPath the first time and you make a 85, right, regardless of how many times you go through IntelliPath after that, your score cannot be your posted score. I'm saying within the grade book cannot be below an 85, right? So that's what I mean by you can only improve in terms of your score. Okay. Next, you're going to have your objectives. Like I said, those weekly objectives, and then your overall score will be tracked down here on this overview page. So this overview gives you a quick look into that given week. Also, again, this is what I was referring to in terms of determined knowledge. So it's highly, highly recommended that you always choose determined knowledge. That way, IntelliPath can gauge and guide you into the correct questions, the correct level of questions, I should say, that you should be taking on the assessment. Okay. And also up here on the contact, if you have questions on IntelliPath, you can choose that contact to send me a message and ask a question for this particular module. We talked about determined knowledge. We talked about the comfort level. So this is the determined knowledge where, again, be honest, because that is how it's going to track or generate the questions for that particular assessment. So within the learning path, again, this provides you with a quick indication of how well you're doing or what areas of improvement that you should have, right? So, the yellow is okay, I'm competent, I can get through it, but the red, if you see any red, those are areas for improvement that we should focus on, right? So this is where it kind of creates that customized learning path. And those questions are generated based on how you answer those questions, how you answer the questions within that particular section. Okay. So also, if you are struggling with a particular section within IntelliPath, you have options that have no bearing on your grade. So you'll have a practice option where you can practice questions to prepare you for that particular section, right? Or you can learn where it's going to provide you additional guidance to prepare for that particular section. Okay. And for those, I mean, to those, everyone said that they're familiar with IntelliPath, so you're familiar with all of these options here. And then one thing, even those people who said they're familiar with IntelliPath, I have at least one person each term to say that, oh, my IntelliPath grade didn't save. Well, it's important to note that once you exit IntelliPath, once it's time for you to exit IntelliPath, you choose the option to exit the lesson, save it for next time, and exits within IntelliPath itself. Do not use the option to exit out from your browser. From Internet Explorer, Firefox, Google. Do not use the X on the right hand corner. Exit out through IntelliPath. Otherwise, your work will not be saved. Again, time and time again, I get that from people that said their work weren't saved because they exited out from the browser and not from IntelliPath itself. Okay. So there is a troubleshooting number for IntelliPath. Now, if you have issues with IntelliPath, reach out to me. If I cannot resolve it, then we will reach out to the individuals here on support within support. Any questions before we get into the lecture? All right. So for the first week, we will be reviewing or providing an introduction to supply chain and logistics. And from a supply chain perspective, what all right, somebody's typing. Supply chain will be the places, people, and products it goes through before it finally gets to the consumer. Absolutely. Inventory management, procurement, resource. Yep. So the way in the past, the way I discuss supply chain management was I say, look at your iPhone, look at your Samsung phone, right? You have that phone in your hand. But how does that finished good? How does that phone get into your hand? How does it get from the concept from someone from Apple to your hand, right? Now, with the current pandemic, we seen the shortage, of PPE. We've seen the shortage of toilet paper. We've seen the shortage of masks. We've seen the shortage of ventilators, right? And we now have to look at that in terms of supply chain management to say, how do we get those ventilators to the hospitals, right? And first of all, how do the hospitals run out of these ventilators and masks? That's supply chain management. So once the hospital stocked out of those ventilators, once they stocked out of those masks, now they have to look to see where they're going to source these masks from. The reality is that most of the masks came from China. So now that China shut down, where do we get these masks from? So now we have to find another supplier for these masks. Now that we found a supplier within the United States, now that supplier needs to get the materials from that manufacturer, I should say, should get their materials from their supplier. So the mask manufacturer needs to get rolls of fabric. They need to get the string that goes on back of the mask, for example, right? So now that they have sourced the string and the fabric, now they have to figure out how to get those materials to their manufacturing facility. That's logistics, right? Once they've received those raw materials, they produce the part, manufacturing. Now, if they've produced these parts, now they have to send it to a distribution center, logistics, right? And now distribution center has to send these masks to the hospital, logistics. And because the hospital has purchased so many cases of masks, they can't hold all the masks within the hospital itself. So now they have to store it in a warehouse, in the hospital warehouse, right? Logistics. So once we have those cases of masks within the hospital, once we have run out of those cases within the hospital, now the hospital has to send someone to their warehouse to transfer inventory back to the hospital so that those masks can be consumed by the nurses, by the doctors, by the patients. So that is supply chain management and logistics, and all of the at a 50,000 foot level, right? We're not even getting to the 1,000 foot level. So there are a number of players within this concept of supply chain management, and there are a lot of issues that can arise. There are a lot of disruptions that can arise, right? And that's what we talk about within this class, and that's why it is such an important discipline, especially now. Any questions on that? So some of the primary characteristics to supply chain management is responsiveness, reliability, agility, and efficiency. Now, to begin with responsiveness, business partners within the supply and organization supply chain network needs to be responsive to customers' needs and demands, right? So going back to our example, the Chinese manufacturers were not responsive to hospitals across the country because they were shut down. Because they were shut down, these hospitals had to look at alternate sources. They had to look for alternate suppliers, right? But then those suppliers were responsive, and they were able to serve all of the hospitals and private practices and nursing homes around the country, right? So because they were able to serve these hospitals, these healthcare facilities, they were deemed as reliable, right? Reliable and essential, right? We heard that term a lot over the last few months. And in some cases, some organizations had to be agile. They had to be flexible. They had to adjust to the change. One example of a company you've all heard of is Anheuser-Busch, right? Anheuser-Busch makes beer. But because there was a shortage in hand sanitizer, they changed one of their factories. They actually opened, so Ford actually opened a factory that was shut down to make hand sanitizer, right? So Ford, and not even the industry within they operate in, opened up a factory that was shut down to make hand sanitizer. So they were agile, right? They were able to be flexible in their current traditional processes to make a positive impact to feel a need of the country, right? And then also you have to be efficient. So we'll talk about increasing efficiencies. We'll talk about achieving operational excellence using approaches such as Lean and Six Sigma and continuous improvement. So you have to always find ways to become efficient. You always have to find ways to become better within an organization. Okay. So Stephanie, local brewery here where I live in Cambridge, Maryland, did that too. Yep. What brewery is that? 'Cause I know where Cambridge is, near Ocean City. Yeah, I've seen that bottle. I've seen that acronym. I've seen that bottle. So when we talk about supply chain flows, we said that that is the flow of the materials, information, and funds, both upstream and downstream. And a lot of people get these streams confused. But I say the easiest way to remember it is to think of a faucet in terms of the product streams down. Product goes downstream. So the top begins with my suppliers, my raw material suppliers, right, and flows down to my customer. Okay. So if I talk about, I use Tesla as an example a lot. So if I look at the raw rubber suppliers, right? I'm starting with the raw rubber suppliers that makes the tires, right? And that's where the supplier is on this example here. The manufacturer could be Tesla. In Tesla's case, the distributor is Tesla because they distribute their own goods. Tesla also has their own retail facilities, and then it goes to the customers, right? If we look at Amazon, Amazon has the raw material suppliers. The manufacturers manufacture the goods. They actually sell it on Amazon. So Amazon is viewed as the distributor. And then in some cases, Amazon will ship goods to a retailer and then ultimately the finished goods, right? So you have a number of different scenarios. You have a number of different scenarios here in terms of different business partners, in terms of different models from a supply chain perspective. But the important thing is that products, information, and capital funds move both upstream and downstream. Okay, people will say, sure, they will say that, oh well, inventory moves downstream. Well, inventory also moves upstream with returns, right? Inventory also moves upstream for materials that are being recycled, right? Especially now. So if you look up circular economy, that's a big trending term within the supply chain industry right now, where once products are used up, once materials are used up, then those materials get sent back to the manufacturer so that the manufacturer can recycle it and reuse it, right? Nike is a perfect example. So Nike published where they use, I think, 40%. I think every single product they use is at least used from 30 or 40% recycled material, right? So every single Nike product has something recycled in it for the most part, right? So that's where we're talking about the flow of products go back upstream. So it goes from the customer or goes from the retailer back up to the Nike factory so that they can recycle it or grind it up to put it back in to finish new finished goods, right? So that's what we talk about where products go both upstream and downstream. Same thing with information. So information flows downstream in terms of, okay, you're Amazon, right? Amazon sends you information downstream when you get that email that say, okay, your product was shipped. That's information moving downstream to you, right? But in some cases, retailers will send information back upstream to Walmart, back upstream to Amazon, back upstream to Nike, right? In terms of how many products did a customer purchase? Because they share that information. That way, Nike can be proactive in ensuring that they have the capacity to produce the products for this massive company like Walmart, for example, when that order does come in, right? So that's why that information flows upstream, right? And then Amazon sends that information downstream. Okay. And funds, I mean, that's kind of self-explanatory where, you're going to send funds downstream as well as funds upstream. Any questions on that? All right. So there is one concept that you'll hear come up often, and that is referred to as the bullwhip effect. And if you go on YouTube and type in the beer game, the beer you drink, BEER, the beer game it demonstrates the bullwhip effect within supply chain management. So the way the beer game works is that within the beer game, you have all of these participants, right? So let's just say that we're all in this class. We're saying that we're going to break up in groups of five. Five people is going to be within the customer group. Five people is going to be in the retailers. Five in distributors. Five in manufacturers. Five in suppliers, right? And those five people collaborate. So it starts down here at the customers. It starts downstream at the customer, and the customers say, "How many cases of beer am I going to buy?" Right? And then the retailers say, "How many cases of beer do we think they said they're going to buy?" And then the distributor says, "How many cases do we think the retailer is going to buy?" And it goes all the way up here, all the way to the supplier. So every single actor is guessing on what the node downstream is going to purchase, right? So everyone's in a blind, everyone's guessing, everyone's speculating. And in that first round, now you see that people have stocked out. You see that people have too much inventory, right? And you gather all that information, you keep that information, and in the second round, you do the same thing. Okay, how many cases of beer are we going to order this week, customer, right? Then the retailer says, "Oof, we were 5 cases short last week. We need to catch up. Plus, we need to guess how many cases this customer is going to buy this week." Same thing. Distributor does the same thing. Manufacturer does the same thing. Supplier does the same thing. Again, you're guessing, but you're also compensating for your excess inventory and your stockouts from the previous week, right? So this goes on and on for about 10 weeks, right? It goes through about 10 iterations, and you see that you have excess inventory, stockouts, excess inventory, stockouts, excess inventory, stockouts for every single one of these nodes throughout the supply chain. And that's why we call that the bullwhip effect. You have peaks and valleys, peaks and valleys, peaks and valleys. Now, after those 10 weeks of going in the blind, guessing and speculating, then you go through a different game. Everything gets wiped clean. And now the customer says, "Okay, Mr. Customer, how many cases are you going to buy?" The customer tells everyone, "I'm buying 10 cases." So if you get it wrong, there's a problem, right? I'm communicating with every single person throughout the supply chain. You can't get it wrong, right? So you have that. Now you do 10 iterations with this. But the curveball within this scenario is that now you have late shipments. Now you have broken shipments within the game. So the logic is built in where I'm going to say, okay, you're giving the answer, but I'm going to throw in supply chain disruptions at you. So even though you know the answer, you have to buffer because there may be late shipments, there may be broken shipments once it arrives at your facility. We are talking about beer bottles here, right? So, but even with those disruptions, with the added communication, you see that you don't have many of those peaks and valleys because you're not playing catch up, and you see that bullwhip, that whip, somewhat levels out, right? So the beer game demonstrates the importance of communication and visibility throughout all nodes, throughout all business partners of the supply chain, right? And that's why that exercise is so important. And it sounds so simple, but very few get it right in the real world, right? Because of trust. They don't trust business partners because they know that that business partners is also supplying their main competitor. So that's why they don't share data. That's why they don't share data with the business partners, right? But it is something as simple as sharing the data. It's something as simple as communicating with that distributor of how many cases of beer am I going to buy this week to save them money, to counter against stockouts, to reduce inventory levels, right? And that's something that's the primary problem that we have within supply chain management. We're continually playing catch up because nobody wants to communicate, nobody wants to trust each other, nobody wants to share information, right? So those supply chains that do share that information, they're using supply chain management as a competitive advantage. And it's a win-win for them, and it's a win-win for their business partners. They're in a league of their own. Any questions on that? So what we just discussed, whenever we're talking about the beer game and whenever we're talking about the importance of communication throughout our business partners, and we're talking about that coordination. We're talking about the information sharing. So, like I said, we need to share the data. Going back to the Amazon example, once Amazon sends me my notification that document that shipment is shipped, I could also hypothetically, I could send them information of how many cases, how many bottles of this particular product do I think I'm going to order over the next year, right? So that Amazon can be proactive in fulfilling my orders, right? Now, if you amplify that by the tens of thousands of people that order this one product that I order, Amazon can get their forecast almost spot on. They could reduce their inventory levels because they don't have to carry buffer inventory because they have the data, right? They have roughly how much these people are going to purchase, right? Because they sent that information upstream. And it's all about, again, that communication. And so that's just an example that you can hopefully relate to. But that is one thing that Walmart has done for years, right? They haven't penetrated the online space yet like Amazon, but in terms of their business partners that they deal with, their suppliers that they deal with, they share this information. Walmart shares that point of sale data with their manufacturers. They say, here's what our customers are purchasing. If they're continuously purchasing 5,000 cases across all of my stores each month, that's what I'm purchasing. I'm telling you what I'm purchasing over the next 5 months, right? So now you can actually look at your manufacturing facility. You can ensure that you have the inventory, the resources on hand to make this product. You can ensure that you have the materials on hand to make this product because I'm telling you what I'm buying, right? And again, it sounds so simple, but Walmart's been doing this for years. And that's why I would say that they're the market leader in the brick and mortar space, right? Because I will put Amazon and Walmart in two different categories. They have two different demographics, in my opinion, right? I don't think that Walmart wants to compete with Amazon because they can't compete with Amazon. So they stick with their core competency of the brick and mortar retail space and be the best that they can at it. And that's how they're successful. They're not going to be able, in my opinion, they're not going to be able to get even close to Amazon because they don't have the supplier base that Amazon has. So they're going to have a different communication model with their business partners than Amazon does. And Amazon is leveraging the tools such as artificial intelligence to inform them of what customers may buy. And they can do that and forecast that at pretty good accuracy. Because you have to remember that Amazon and Netflix were the pioneers of artificial intelligence. So they have been trying to perfect artificial intelligence for about 6 years now, right? So they have algorithms that you probably hadn't even heard of. They're not even going to tell you about the algorithms they have within artificial intelligence to guess, to reduce their inventory levels, to increase their forecasting accuracy in terms of what we want to buy. So that goes again with that information sharing and goes into that collaboration. So okay, got 5 minutes. So whenever we talked about the importance of collaboration externally, in that we have to collaborate with our suppliers, with our customers, so that we're sharing data, we're sharing information, so that we're proactive in what the customers want. But we did not talk about the internal collaboration among departments, this interdepartmental collaboration within the organization, right? And I'm sure that you have heard of organizations and departments working in silos where essentially purchasing stays in purchasing with that tunnel vision, sales stays in sales with that tunnel vision, finance stays in finance, right? But that is to the downfall of the organization in that if all of these departments are collaborating, and we're going to see this with sales and operations planning where all departments come together and they look at the long-term strategic plan. They look at the growth strategy of the organization to understand, how much is the organization going to grow? How many product lines are we going to roll out? If we roll out all these product lines, do we have to open up a new factory? If we do, where are we going to open it up at? Right? With if manufacturing only has that tunnel vision and we say we need to open up a factory, without the input from finance, finance can come in and say, we don't have the funds to build a new manufacturing facility, right? So you have to have the input of all players within an organization from an operational perspective. And it's just not from a strategic perspective, it's also from a short term tactical perspective. Whenever we're looking at, our annual budgets, right? How much money are we going to pour into R&D? How much money are we going to pour into manufacturing? How much money are we going to pour into marketing, right? So you need those perspectives because they all have a different view, right? They have different backgrounds, they have different requirements, they have different priorities for the organization, right? So if they all come together, if all of these departments come together for the common goal, the common vision and mission of the organization, that is what, how an organization can collaborate and use and leverage supply chain management as a competitive advantage for the organization. Okay. So it's very important to break down those silos of the company. So moving forward, again, the next discussion is going to be next Tuesday, and we're going to talk about more in terms of logistics. We're also going to talk about outsourcing. So, with insourcing, we are making our products and services in-house. With outsourcing, we are outsourcing those processes to other partners. Now, we're also going to talk about an organization's core competency. Core competency is I focus on what I do well, right? Amazon's core competency is distribution and logistics, right? Amazon outsources manufacturing of everything. They know they're not good at manufacturing, they don't do it. They depend on their suppliers to manufacture those goods and sell them on Amazon, right? So Amazon, you could say that Amazon outsources all products, right? And you can say that Amazon is, that the e-market in e-marketplace, an e-commerce space, that found their core competency in logistics, right? You can say that. Some may argue that, but that's my view. We're also going to talk about supply chain performance measurement. Again, the measurement's very important to measure how good, how well, or poorly an organization is doing. We're going to talk about green supply chains. We're going to talk about sustainability. We're going to talk about corporate social responsibility, where an organization looks at what we refer to as a triple bottom line, which is people, planet, and profit. And that environmental aspect is where we talk about that green supply chain concept. Again, the whole circular economy concept, your circular supply chains concept, where you are taking your packaging, you're taking your used goods, you're taking what we refer to as cores within the automotive industry. So that means like an old battery, a dead battery could be referred to as a core, right? And we send cores back to the battery manufacturer, and they actually take parts out of those batteries and repurpose them in brand new batteries, or grind down part of the parts within that old battery, that core, to make brand new batteries, right? So that's that circular supply chain concept. We're going to talk about the importance of technology and how technology has essentially transformed the practice of supply chain management. And again, as we said, we're going to talk about globalization, the benefits and drawbacks to global supply chains, the benefits and drawbacks to the reliance of overseas manufacturers, like in China. We're seeing the impacts right now, as I said before. And we're also seeing the benefits of globalization, because now that we are on a global scale, now we have more suppliers, now we have more bargaining power at our disposal, right? If we only stay domestically, okay, I have five suppliers across the country to choose from because I'm so specialized, right? But if I expand it to the global perspective, now I have 50 to choose from, right? So now I have bargaining power. Now I can look for a higher quality raw material, for example. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at that in more detail. And again, we're going to look at lean supply chain. So reducing waste from an activity perspective, from a product perspective, from a process perspective. So we're going to talk about that. So we have a lot to talk about within this course. But as I said, we always try to relate it to what's going on in today's society. So any questions on that? And that's going to, again, the chat, I have Wednesday on here. Chat's going to be next. All right. Thank you for attending tonight's session. I will be uploading this chat within the course. I will issue out extra credit, and I will be on the discussion boards in about an hour. All right. Thank you. Have a great night.